Before we actually create our queries, we need to talk about how we're going to reference our objects. Every object inside of a database has four parts to its name: the server that it's inside of, the database that it's inside of, the schema that it's inside of, and the name of the object itself. Now, the server is, of course, the server that's housing the database, and the server is optional. I don't have to provide the name of the server. If I don't provide the name of the server, what will happen is SQL will use the server that I'm currently connected to. You will find with most queries that you don't bother putting in the name of the server. The same thing holds true with database. That database, of course, will be the database that the object is inside of, and if you don't provide the name of the database, it will default to the database that you're currently connected to. Schemas inside of SQL Server are basically like folders, and they allow me to structure objects, set permissions, and also potentially reuse names. Now, the thing about schemas is that it is possible to have a default schema. If you don't provide the name of the schema, then it will go to your default. And if you don't have a default schema, or if SQL couldn't find the object inside of that schema, what it will then do is use the DBO schema. The problem with depending on the default schema is that default schemas may change, or somebody else may execute my code that has a different default schema. Because of that fact, the best practice is to always specify the name of the schema. Finally, of course, is the name of the object. And well, if I'm going to connect to an object, I kind of have to provide its name. That, of course, is going to be required. SQL does have rules about object names, that my object names have to start with a letter or an underscore, and then from there on forward can only contain letters, numbers, or underscores. But it is possible that you may create an object that has an invalid character. So for example, I might have a space, or I might have, other characters like that. If you have an item that has an invalid character, what you need to do when you go to reference that object is you need to quantify that by putting either square brackets or double quotes around it. The thing about double quotes, however, is that it must be enabled on the server by using what's known as quoted identifiers, so it's an option, so it might not actually be there. As a result, you'll notice most people use square brackets, and I recommend that as the best practice if you're needing to put that around an object. One little side note. You'll notice that most applications that create SQL dynamically will put square brackets around every object name, regardless of whether or not it's required. And it's basically just easier to program that way. That rather than me having to program my application to know what all the different special characters are and otherwise that are and aren't allowed, just put square brackets around everything and it will make life easier for the application. Most people that create the queries, however, won't bother doing that. Finally, we have case sensitivity. This is a question that I always get asked whenever I'm teaching a programming class. Is this case sensitive? My answer to that, without climbing onto too big of a soapbox, is always the same. Treat everything like it's case sensitive. The reason for that is because if you treat something like it's case sensitive and it's not, you're just fine. But if you treat something like it's not case sensitive and it is, you're going to wind up running into trouble. Additionally, a lot of times you wind up inside of what I like to call mixed case environments, where maybe I'm making a call from an environment that's not case sensitive, but I'm making calls into an environment that is case sensitive. And so now I wind up running into trouble. So if you just treat everything like it's case sensitive, it's going to make your life easier. That being said, to answer the question, T-SQL keywords are not case sensitive. However, convention is to put all T-SQL keywords in capital letters. It just makes your query that much more readable. Additionally, it's worth noting that string comparisons may be case sensitive. More often than not, you'll notice that that option will be disabled, but it is possible that in your environment, case sensitivity may be enabled. It is possible to disable this at the server level, at the database level, at the column level, and even actually at the query level. So if I need or don't need something to be case sensitive, I can configure that based on where I am.